Hey, welcome back to Cream City Dreams. I am your host, Megan Schultz, and this is the podcast where I bring on incredible Milwaukee women week after week, hoping to inspire you with their stories so you can live your Cream City dreams, or your dream wherever you're listening from, if it's not the Cream City. Today, I am bringing back a guest listeners should know, Thekla Brumder Ross. And we are reconnecting at the end of summer. You'll remember that Thekla was with me for the entire month of May, talking about digital literacy, screens, what happens to our brains on screens. And I thought I would bring her back at the end of summer to see how we did, to see how summer went with the challenge that we both set ourselves. So pull up a chair, go for a walk, grab a coffee, and enjoy this episode with Thekla. Today on the podcast, I am talking with Thekla Brumder Ross. And listeners, if you don't recognize this name, then I'm going to stop you right here and have you go back to the mini series that Thekla and I ran back in May on attention and screens and what all of these digital devices have been doing to our brains and our nervous systems. But if you're still pushing on and you're here, let me remind you that Thekla is a friend and a fellow mom. Our kids are at the same school, but she's also a clinical psychologist, an addiction specialist, self-compassion and mindfulness instructor, and maybe most importantly, a fellow human who is walking this path alongside us, learning and growing, and I feel certain she won't mind me saying, sometimes flailing, just like the rest of us. She's shaking her head, nodding her head. Welcome back, Thekla.
Thank you so much, Megan. It's so great to be back on Cream City Dreams.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring you back at the end of the summer and to close off the season of joy because this summer really has been joyful for me. And I feel like a huge part of that has been the digital detox. That's been huge. We talked the entire month of May about this, kind of leading up to this experiment that I was going to take in the month of June of taking Facebook and Instagram off my phone. And I didn't delete or deactivate the accounts, but I took them off my phone and I undid the logins on my computer so that it's just not there, in essence. And that was supposed to last for a month. And as we're recording, it's almost mid-August and I'm still off. So thank you.
Yes, I'm so excited. Well, thank yourself. I mean, let's just have a little self-compassion moment here where you just tune in and you thank yourself because you acknowledge that at some point these social media platforms were causing suffering, more suffering than joy, right? To go back to the summer of joy. And you paused and had a little mindfulness and you talked to yourself like a friend would and said, okay, let's just do a little test. Let's see how it feels to take them out of our life for a little bit and what are they adding and what are they subtracting to our lives? And you really answered the call and really turned towards yourself, which is hard to do. So I just want to commend you for that. And by doing that, you also modeled that for your community on this podcast and for me. So it's been a delight to be on that journey with you. And I share in the joy this summer. As listeners know, I'm off socials except for LinkedIn, but I have been on it far less because of Megan and this incredible detox. And I went in and started learning more about the algorithms and how it's working and all of the craziness behind that, which had me stepping back even further.
Oh, interesting.
Because I didn't want to feed into that and I want to have more sense of control and agency in my life.
Yeah.
And I too have had a summer of joy because I've been so intentional about my phone use.
Yeah.
And I've talked to my family, my community, and I'm talking about it all the time. And it's been really joyous to go back to human nature and getting the dopamine hits from touching flowers and hugging family members and being present in the moment. And as cheesy and as corny as that sounds, folks, it's real. And if your life is feeling less enjoyable, it's probably because of the scroll. So welcome back to the light.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say it wasn't overnight, no. June 1st, June 2nd, June 3rd. And really the first month probably wasn't necessarily relaxing. Like I think I had this idea that, oh, once I stop social media, I will have so much free time. Life will be so spacious. And I used the analogy in one of our conversations before about the vacation, and like it takes the first couple days to really, if you're gone for a week, say on some tropical island, it takes the first 3 or 4 days just to chill out and just be there and be present without thinking about what's going on back at home. And and it's finally usually like the day before you go home where you're like, oh, okay, I'm relaxed now. And that's where I feel it took me I think a couple months to get there. Like I feel like I am there now, and it does feel more spacious and more intentional, but I think it took a couple months of just being so mindful. And so I was so grateful for all our conversations about the mindfulness and the paying attention and the noticing that I was doing in those couple months to finally get to a relaxed state where, okay, I'm here. Here I am.
Beautiful. And for those who didn't hear the Brain on Screens episode, go back and listen, because what Megan is describing is actually her brain detoxing from the social and rewiring her dopamine reinforcement loops. And so she had to get to it took time. It takes over 30 days to get time for those dopamine reinforcement loops to elongate again and to not get used to those regular flood of hits that come through scroll. So, and if folks want more info on that, there's a great book called Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke, a famous addiction psychiatrist. And she talks in chapter 4 about dopamine fasting. And so you can learn even more about it. Yeah.
Is that something that she recommends we do
Yes.
all the time? Or like
it's a good
spurts
question.
or
Yeah. I'm in the business, and we've talked about this in the other episodes, of sustainable behavior change. So the smaller steps you take, the more likely they are. One, you build confidence through practice and knowledge of taking those smaller steps, and you get more confident because you accomplish your goal by taking a smaller step rather than a bigger step. And so you and I talked in the beginning about, the sort of all or nothing, like taking everything out, right? And is that really sustainable? And one of the things I give you a lot of credit for, Megan, is that you did decide what was going to be sustainable, and you really prepared. We took weeks to prepare, and by doing so, you've been able to fast longer. And so I think there's intentionality around what is doable in your life and your lifestyle, and to try and test that and play around with that. And that's different for everyone.
Yeah, that's interesting because as this season is coming to a close, as I said, it was going to be a summer thing that I did. And then as like logistically things may start popping up where being a little bit more online may be necessary or helpful, I have, been trying to think intentionally about if I were online today, what would I do? Because there have been moments, like there are some really cool things happening in our city. And as it relates to this podcast, things that our guests are doing, that I was sad in the moment that I couldn't promote that. Right. I didn't want to come on and scroll. I didn't want to come on and see what I've been missing, but I wanted to share this thing that I had heard about that a guest was doing. So I feel like if I come back, I want to be intentional about why I'm online, not scrolling. Like maybe I set the rule for myself that if I post something, it has to be promoting someone else. Or, I don't know if that's the rule I would necessarily set for myself, but something like that where I'm really purposeful about what I'm doing, how long I'm taking to do it. We talked on one of the episodes and you gave me the suggestion to schedule it. So maybe my episodes drop on Wednesdays. Maybe you can always know that Cream City Dreams will post on Wednesdays, and she'll share the episode link and 5 other things about guests. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but something along those lines so that it is really purposeful, is really intentional, and makes me feel good when I do it.
100%. So when you're going back to the whole conversation we started with in our digital literacy parent night, which is our values, going back to our values and what do we want to use this tool for? Megan, you and I were talking before we went on the pod today. Technology is a tool. It's intended to be used as a tool. Unfortunately, we are in this place in our society where it is encompassing everything and we're not turning the tool off. I think I said this in a previous pod that Dr. Rich from Boston Children's Hospital says it's like a chainsaw, right? You use a chainsaw to cut down a tree or to cut something, and then you turn the chainsaw off. We're not turning our phones off or turning our tools off. But if you know that you're going to use this tool, you're going to use social media to promote Cream City Dreams, to promote your fabulous guests, to engage your community, then you know you're going on to intentionally do that. And now you're super mindful and attuned to scrolling, what it's doing to your brain, what it's doing to your body, what it's doing to your connection with yourself, your family members, and your community, and probably your interaction with the earth and the planet, because it takes time away from that and you've experienced it now. So now you have this intentionality, you have a values clarification, and now you know exactly what tool you want to use it for. Engage with the tool in a structured way, whether it's scheduling, whether it's time, whatever you choose for it to be. But there's intentionality and structure around that. And again, for folks listening, I will say there's what we call the continuum of use. I mean, it's an addictive technology. It's like having a slot machine 24/7 in the palm of our hands. And there's a continuum of use. So there's the extreme where you can't get off, you can't stop scrolling. You look at it before you go to bed, and when you get up in the morning, you take it to the bathroom and you're always on your phone. And that's extreme. That's severe, addiction to the use. And then there's people who rarely use it at all, right? Who use it as a phone to physically call somebody, or as a camera to take a picture of something, or as a GPS, and that's it. And they just use it as a tool. And so it's really about getting curious about your continuum of use and where you are in terms of utilization of this tool.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I think we have been talking around that, but I don't know if we've named that yet, about this, the idea of it as a tool, and how can we more consciously choose to use it as a tool. I love that. I feel like I, without naming it like that, did that when I, in June, like centered, you have all the different pages that you can scroll through on your phone with all the apps. And I just put, these are the ones that I'm going to use it as a tool for. So I did keep maps because, I wasn't going to print out MapQuest. I kept my contacts. I kept my phone, or the phone part of it. I kept the camera. I kept the library app because I like to request books. And so, like, just the ones that I feel like I'm not going to shame myself for using it, because it is a tool and because it is helpful. There is a reason these things exist, right?
Oh, it's so right. And I had a great conversation with my kids. I know you did too, and on a previous pod, where they were like, well, Mama, you do use it more, for this, that, and the other thing in the morning. And I said, you're right. I have a lot of friends. Like, friendships are my medicine. They are how I survive and move through the world. And I nourish them on a regular basis. Like, I am constantly sending messages to people like, I'm thinking of you, or I saw this flower and it reminded me of you. And so I am, if you looked at my utilization on my phone, like, it is email and text, right? Those are the heaviest things. So for me, that feedback from my kids was like, okay, schedule it so that it doesn't penetrate into every hour of the day. Have some time in the morning when you text, and some time midday, and some time in the evening. And shout out to fellow parents who told me that they do that. They have check-in times between the mom and the dad, early morning, midday, and evening check-in times, so that they don't feel like they have to be always on their phone and like have a watch binging and notifying and notifications. He's a physician and he can't check in all the time, right? He's with patients. And so I thought that was a really beautiful and brilliant way to kind of be intentional about the tool.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. So the other thing I wanted to talk with you about that I did notice over the summer is that anytime I would talk about this journey, this detox that I was doing with a friend or a family member or whoever, I would elicit a pretty strong reaction one way or the other. Maybe it was like a congratulations, or maybe it was like, oh, wow, I could never do that. Or there was a feeling like they immediately went to justifying why they could never do that, or that to me felt tinged with shame or guilt around how they use their phone or how they allow their kids to use their phone or whatever. And I'm just so curious because well, this whole conversation just elicits such emotion. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts on how do we deal with this as a society and as a community, you know, as friends, as family members, when perhaps our values differ in how we decide to use them for ourselves or for our families or all of the above.
Mhm. Oh, I'm so glad you named the emotional climate behind this conversation because it is directly parallel to the disease of addiction and
Mm,
shame and stigma and guilt and denial and judgment and all of that is just deeply encompassing of addictions. It doesn't matter what drug we're talking about, whether we're talking about nicotine or heroin or alcohol, like it elicits a lot of these feelings and a lot of this intensity and a lot of this sort of judgment and righteousness and I
mm-hmm.
can't or I won't or congratulations or I wish or you know all of that. And so I too started noticing this and really kind of sat back and tuned in to watch people this summer as you and I both talked about it in so many different ways within our community. And I've named it before on the pod before, which is be be open to like naming those difficult emotions in the presence of the conversations with folks. Like I
Mm,
know this could elicit a lot of shame. You're not alone in this conversation. You keep hearing me say, Megan, like just because I'm the addiction expert that's coming on this podcast does not make me immune to any of what we're talking about. I am deeply imperfect. And I too am struggling with all of the things we're all struggling with, right? Because we haven't defined this in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and we aren't out here talking about tech addiction in the same way we're talking about tobacco, right? We're
mm,
just not. And so we're defining for our culture and our families and our communities our relationships around this conversation. And you and I are acutely aware then of all of these stigma type emotions that are coming up around
mm.
tech use.
Yeah. I, I'm curious just what is the language when you say it's similar because of
Mhm.
those feelings, because of guilt and shame? Like, what draw more parallels, I guess, is maybe where
Yeah,
I'm going with
yeah.
this.
Well, I'm going to give all credit to the rooms of recovery who have really dealt with the emotional uh, heaviness that comes as a result of stopping use or continuing use or returning to use and the family disease of addiction and how it impacts all of us in our communities. I mean, the 12 steps are incredible ways of moving through the righteousness and the shame and the guilt and the repairing of relationships and the taking of inventory. And I have to say, as somebody who's not only studied the 12 steps as a part of my own clinical practice, but as a part of being in a family that was deeply impacted by the disease, it's helpful for all of us and any one of us in any sort of addiction that we're moving through. And again, if I'm going to quote Anna Lemke in her book, Dopamine Nation, she also talks about moving through the 12 steps as a way for any of us to look at any of our addictive behaviors and moving through them. And so I would just say, yes, there are many ways in the rooms of recovery that people are able to deal with the ripple effects that you just mentioned in terms of the emotional impact of addiction.
Mm, I hadn't thought about that. Does she, in Dopamine Nation, does she rewrite the 12 steps for tech?
Oh no, she does not because this book had come out. I mean, she talks about tech addiction in it, but not in the definition sort of way. And it doesn't only focus on tech. It also
Oh,
talks
okay.
about alcohol and other drugs.
All
Yeah,
kinds of dopamine.
yeah,
Okay. All
yeah.
kinds of hits. But wouldn't that be
Yes.
interesting maybe to think? I don't know the 12 steps by heart, but I'm wondering if would you even need to rewrite? Maybe you wouldn't need to rewrite them
No, you
for,
wouldn't. You wouldn't need to at all. So, the 12 steps are also used for family members in Al-Anon, for family members of those who have been impacted by the disease and you work with a sponsor to move through the 12 steps. And we can read them out loud here on the pod if that's helpful or advantageous, but it's really a process of moving through the emotions behind the impacts and the ripple effect of the disease of addiction.
hmm.
Mhm. Yeah,
I think
it's
I'm going to have
beautiful.
to find those to read to see I don't know what that brings up in terms of just digitally for me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I highly recommend Melody Beattie's work. She does a lot around codependency and just around the 12 steps in recovery for family members. There's also the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, where if you want to just like from an intellectual standpoint, look at the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, that's a great book. And it's also something we can, and if other audience members are interested, and we can return to. Folks who are listening know that I am writing a book about our curiosity and awareness of our relationship with and to technology. And you will see a lot of the recovery principles woven throughout the book. It's a foundational part of the book.
Mm. Hmm. Well, I guess where I'd love to take this conversation next, because this was a summer, as I mentioned earlier, this was kind of a summer experiment for me. And we're moving back into the fall. And for many of us, that means kids go back to school. It means more routines. It means we're back in, I was going to say alignment, but maybe not alignment, but we're thrown back in with our people, our school people, or our, our routine people, whatever that means for listeners. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on taking this new perspective then back into a world that might not be in alignment, right? So maybe we get back to school and all the kids here, they jump right back on the screens because that's what all their friends that they haven't been surrounded with all summer, but they're back in that world, or just whatever world we're getting back into that might not be in alignment. How do we stay strong in what we're trying to do in terms of this attention?
Well, let's lean back on what we were just talking about in the 12 steps. And one of them is taking radical inventory. So, taking inventory of your life and your behavior, like what's working, what's not, what's serving, where do you need to get honest, really get
Mm.
truly honest about your own behaviors. And so for me, one of the things I'm going to be taking radical inventory about is like, okay, looking back over the last 4 seasons, where have I been in most balance with my tech and when? And why was that different from another season? And what did that look like? And what were some of the habits or behaviors that I adopted in the times when I was using less tech? And can I translate those behaviors to going back into school time and school culture? So I'll give an example, like I really stopped watching television and just numbing out on Netflix at night,
Mm.
because I find that if I'm in front of a screen all day for work, then I got to be doing other non-tech related behaviors at night. And I've fallen back in love with reading and all of the books and baths and staring off into space and picking flowers in my backyard and all sorts of things, and being with friends and community. And so, how do I translate some of those behaviors when it gets cold outside, or into the winter time when it gets darker earlier? And what are the traditions that I want to sort of continue and move past? And then I continue to talk about take inventory with my family. So I just did it last night with my husband in bed. What are the traditions and things we want to keep doing, and what are the things that maybe we want to continue to adapt? And again, I'm never perfect. I'm just tweaking and adapting and saying, oh, this is working and feeling good, or this isn't. And then how do I change it? And for those who are listening who have things they can't control, like their work, they have to be on it for a certain amount of time. I hear you and I'm with you, and that may not be in your locus of control, but in your hours of your day that are in your control, take inventory of those times of the day.
Mm. I love that. It really comes back to those, as you said earlier, those just small, manageable, sustainable steps. And then what brings you joy? Here we go with the joy. What brings the joy and what doesn't, and just let go of that. So I love that radical inventory. That's how
Taking
they,
inventory is, yes, it was one of the 12 steps.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Taking
love
radical
that.
inventory. I would also say for folks who notice that you can't, like you take inventory and you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't stop. That's okay too. There's help for that. There's resources for that. If you feel like you tried to do a tech detox and you got so anxious and so depressed and so overwhelmed, that is the nature of your brain being addicted to the flood of dopamine that comes so quickly and so rapidly.
Mm.
And so being able to go get clinical support and help for that is really, really important. So don't see that as a barrier, like you can't. Some of us are more susceptible than others. I'm one of them. I come from a family of addiction on both sides. So like I am more susceptible to the disease. And so just noticing that and seeking support and help for that as needed. So please don't feel like you're off on an island or alone if it's really hard and you can't stop.
Mm. Do we have therapists in Milwaukee who kind of specialize in attention or tech?
I would say any therapist would be able to deal with this issue. I would say particularly therapists who work in addiction medicine and with the disease, but most
Mm.
should be able to. So I would say any therapist and all therapists. Are there some who are starting to specialize in tech? Yes, but as I said, it's not defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So I have a handful of folks I know from around the country who are starting to specialize in it. But folks who are listening, you'll see more and more of that specifically as the years go on and we start to define it more clinically and
Mm.
provide evidence-based practices for it as well.
Yeah, I think you gave the answer to this I may have asked this in another episode, but are we on the cusp of that or where are we professionally?
There's committees through ASAM and through American Psychological Association and as a part of the DSM-6 that are looking at it, but it's very much still under formulation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tekla, this has just been a summer of, well, I don't know how many times I can say the word joy in this podcast, but I'm so grateful for the conversations that we have been having. And I want to ask one last question about joy before I let you go. And that is something I've been asking every guest this summer on the pod is, what advice do you have for people who may need more joy or want to bring more joy into their life?
I love this question, which is why I love you in Cream City Dreams. So if you were to ask me what's bringing me the most joy, like I can't wait to get out of bed in the morning to go write in my journal. And
Mm.
it is with a pencil and a piece of paper. And it's in a specific location in my house that's surrounded by windows where I can look outside and stare at the blades of green grass and the birds fly by and the garbage cans outside my house. And really all I'm saying is being grateful and noticing and having awe and gratitude towards the everyday things in my life that I haven't stopped and paid attention to in a long time and haven't just been grateful for the moment and the process that I'm in as opposed to the destination I'm trying to get to and the next thing that I want or the accumulation or the material object or what have you. And I've noticed that in doing that behavior every day, it has a ripple effect on the choices I make throughout the day. Like I've been shopping less because I'm more grateful for what I actually already have than what I need or want.
Mm.
So that's just an example of me finding more joy in the everyday moments of life and checking in with it ritually. This is me, the structured behaviorist, right? And I noticed we were talking about a weekend trip I went on to Door County, and I wasn't able to in that situation or environment journal every day, and I noticed that I missed it. And
Mm.
I really love that. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Just that self-reflection that gives you the reminder that I am enough. I have enough. This
mhm,
is enough. Yeah. I love that.
mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. And actually, I'll just have to say also another plug to Megan and her great work. She also is an artist, tweet for folks who don't know this. And she has cards and stationery, and they're words that I purchased from Megan's great work, her artwork, earlier in 2025. And so they sit on my desk and remind me of the simplicities of abundance and gratitude and introspection. And so I look at
Mm.
those on my desk while I'm
Oh.
journaling.
Oh, thanks. That's so that makes me feel so happy.
Mhm,
Thank you. So
mhm.
joyful.
Good.
Well, thank you for continuing to be my person in all of this. I love our conversations. I hope we can continue them. I would say listeners get used to hearing Tekla's voice. I would imagine she'll be back. We've got some things in the works that we've been talking about, but to close off the season of joy, I just want to say thank you and appreciate you and your work and your wisdom that you have brought to the pod this summer. So
Thank you. Thank you for having me and thank you for asking and for being so vulnerable to really open yourself up to pause and to look inward and then be able to talk about that out loud on a podcast so that other people could feel comfortable doing it too. So you and I have both heard from people in our community who have felt more willing to have the conversation and explore because you've done it in a public forum. So thank you. And yes, we'll be back. And listeners, if there are specific topics around tech and our behavior and our relationship with tech that you want us to dive in on, don't hesitate to let us know. Go to Cream City Dreams. There's a really fun and easy little voice memo you can do, or send Megan an email.
Yep. We would love that. All right. Thank you, Thekla.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. Season 8 with a bow on it. You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Thekla. Like I said at the very beginning, if this was the first time you've heard us talk about this, go back and listen to the episodes that start at the beginning of May. And actually, Thekla came on board for a couple of my Friday digests in July, where we sort of touched base on how we're doing and talked about how our summers were going so far. And she came in with some more thoughtful conversation about screens and attention and returning to screens if we decide we want to. So those are definitely worth a listen as well. And as of the day I'm recording this, listeners, I don't know. Will I be back? Still don't know. Maybe. But if I'm really not missing it, why bother? This summer has also given me time to think about other things I might want to do. And some of those things include women's circles, include offering writing classes or dream building workshops. I have been dreaming up a list of things that I would like to do. And next month I turn 50. So there's been all of that contemplation of where I want the next decade to take me. So be sure you are on my newsletter, because those folks will find out about all of these things first. You can sign up at creamcitydreams.com and find out what's next. But until then, Milwaukee, keep on dreaming.